Good evening, and thank you for watching. My name is Dan Shear, editor of the Green Valley News and the Sahuarita Sun, and I'm going to be the moderator for this evening's debate among candidates in State Legislative District 21. The Citizens Clean Election Commission is the sponsor for this event. As the state's voter education agencies, Clean Elections hosts debates so voters have the opportunity to hear directly from the candidates, ask questions on the issues that matter most to them, and vote informed. Candidates who have a contested general election have been invited to participate in the debate. Please note, candidates from both the Senate and the House are participating in the debate tonight. As the moderator, I will ensure candidates have the opportunity to engage directly with their respective opponents. The questions that will be asked this evening are coming directly from voters. Leading up to the debates, Clean Elections conducted outreach to voters across the state asking for questions for the candidates. Additionally, Clean Elections surveyed voters to learn what issues are important to them. This survey, along with input from journalists at the Arizona Capital Times, Arizona Agenda, and Green Valley News and Sahuarita Sun, will guide the discussion so it best serves voters. Of course, we want to hear directly from you, the voter. So voters who are watching this debate live, you can submit a question at any time in one of three ways. You can email debates@kc-a.com. That's debates@kc-a.com. You can text 480-808-1814, or you can call 480-937 1253, and I'll be repeating this information later in the debate. Please indicate if your question is for a specific candidate or for all the candidates. And we've already had some questions coming in. We screen questions for clarity to eliminate duplications, speeches, or personal attacks on candidates. The debate is scheduled for 90 minutes, so we may not get to all the audience questions, but we're going to do our best. Candidates, you will have 1 minute for your opening and closing statements and 1 to 2 minutes for your responses to voter questions. We encourage an open exchange of dialogue between opponents. If you feel the need to respond to another candidate's comments, jump in and just do so. I may limit responses to better manage our time, and we remind the candidates and the audience that this is a respectful, courteous, and professional environment. Our goal tonight is to connect candidates and voters so our electorate may be informed. Now let's meet our candidates, then we'll give them time for a 1 minute opening statement. We have two candidates running for one Senate seat, Republican Jim Cleveland and Democrat Rosana Gabaldon. And we have 4 candidates running for 2 House seats in LD21, Democrat Consuelo Hernandez, who could not make it tonight, Republican Damian Kennedy, Republican Deborah McEwen, and Democrat Stephanie Stahl Hamilton. The candidates are going to give opening statements in alphabetical order, starting with the Senate. We will reverse that order for closing statements. So Jim Cleveland, we are going to give you the first shot at it. He is a candidate for state Senate. Go ahead and start us off.
All right. Well, thank you, Dan. So good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Jim Cleveland. I am a Republican running for LD21, Arizona State Senate. And I got to say, I love Arizona. My family's lived in Arizona since the early 1880s. In fact, we still have the original family homestead in the Mule Mountains outside of Bisbee that my grandfather homesteaded in about 1898. My wife, Dora, and I have been married for 33 years. We have 6 wonderful children, 3 amazing grandchildren, 2 of who were just born this summer, so that's exciting. So as you might guess, families are important to me, but not just my family, but all families. We were watching a movie the other night, and the main character, played by Jimmy Stewart, said the family is the rock upon which the civilization is built. Well, I couldn't agree more. And I feel like the family, and specifically children, are under attack. You got this torrent of drugs flooding our streets, you got hostile school boards, you have human and sex trafficking, and politically correct craziness running through all our institutions. So I'm running to help strengthen and protect families, to give families the freedom to raise their children in a safe environment. I think families are worth fighting for, and I feel strong families make strong communities. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jim Cleveland. Now Rosana Gabaldon, also a Senate candidate.
Good evening, everyone, and what a pleasure this is. I want to thank Dan for moderating and Clean Elections for hosting us. As Dan said, I'm Rosanna Gavaldon. I've been serving at the legislature since 2013, and I have to say, every day is such it's a delight and a privilege to know that I'm representing my constituency down in Southern Arizona, because I bring ideas from Southern Arizona, because that's what Arizona needs: a little common sense and straight from the heart. I bring effective leadership, integrity. I have, and again, common sense. I am known as a statesman. I'm able to have discussions with both sides of the aisle. It's very important, because if we don't listen to each other, we're not going to get anywhere. This past legislative session, I actually served on 3 committees. I was the ranking member of Transportation and Technology. I was in Health and Human Services and in Commerce. And why I share this with you is because those 3 committees were very important. We talked about legislation that was really impacting the state. There's so much going on in the state, and what I really like is and people, when I share this, people kind of look at me in a very curious way, and I say, because we agree more than we disagree. You just don't hear about it. You just don't hear about the conversations that I have with my colleagues from across the aisle and my own caucus. So I'm really looking forward to continuing serving you as your Arizona State Senator. And I've lived in Southern Arizona since 1973. I love it down here. Been married 35 years to Arturo. We have a son, Andres, and very proud graduate of the University of Arizona. And I just want to continue to be your public servant. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rosanna Gavaldon. Now our House candidates will start with Republican Damian Kennedy.
Thank you, Dan. I want to take a moment to thank Dan for moderating tonight, just as Roseanne did. I know there's a lot of news floating around right now, and you taking your time out to do this is greatly appreciated. I am Damian Kennedy. I'm your candidate for LD21 State House of Representatives. I am a blue-collar father that lives and works smack dab in the middle of this district. I have been a leader in my community as a Cub Scout den leader and as a Boy Scout leader. I have been president of my local PTO and as chairman within the district before this was Legislative District 21. Now, I have been all over this district as a voter and as a tourist, and as a chairman, I've been around the previous district hearing all the issues. And then I had the glorious opportunity as a candidate to tour around, talk to voters, talk to independents, and hear their feelings and learn even more about the issues brought on by poor leadership over the last 10 years, locally and legislatively. I live in the middle of this district, as I said, and I have seen firsthand the immigrant issues, water issues, road, sewer, even employment issues. This is a brand new district. We are Legislative District 21, and what we do now speaks volumes to what will happen for the next 10 years. Redistricting numbers can say what they want, but I hear you as voters and as my constituents. Therefore, it is time for new leadership, new forward thinking that can help craft intelligent legislation. I will work hard to solve red tape issues for small businesses to create a better economy in Southern Arizona, so our graduating students don't have to be told to head north to find their future and their piece of the American pie. I look forward to creating an atmosphere of trust, inclusion, and knowledge about our election processes so my constituents can be comfortable knowing that their vote is legal, theirs, and counted.
Okay, thank you, Damian Kennedy. We'll now hear from Republican House candidate Deborah McEwen.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you very much to the Clean Elections Commission for holding these debates. It's quite an honor to be able to give the citizens an idea of who we are and what we stand for. I've lived in my district for about 5 years. I live down in Rio Rico. My name is Deborah McEwen, and I am running for House of Representatives in the new Legislative District 21. My job as a legislator is to protect your constitutional rights and to represent local district interests. with fairness and equality to all citizens, and to scrutinize the work of government for accountability. Well, for many years, I've worked for criminal investigation divisions, and quality assurance and accountability were a big part of that job. We have a long way to go with cleaning up our elections processes and getting our elections manual up to date, and quality assurance and accountability is part of that. I appreciate my small town upbringing that I've had with my family and the lessons that they've taught me with moral values. We were very active in church and community organizations, and I was taught the lessons of serving others, and that is how I participate in my organizations and clubs that I work with down in this area. I hunt with my family as a recreational activity, and I range qualified with my coworkers that I worked with in the criminal justice system. I volunteered to do the dirty work that nobody else seemed to want to do, and I always did it with pride and accountability. More recently, I've served as the state grassroots coordinator for a national organization, and with that experience, I know that I can work across the aisle with all legislative team members. As a conservative, I'll defend the right of every parent to have access to school choice, for Arizonans to freely practice their religion and follow their convictions. I support our veterans, law enforcement, and strong border control. I'll work for our state sovereignty from federal government and administrative bureaucratic overreach. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah McKeown. And finally, Democratic candidate Stephanie Stahl Hamilton.
Good evening, buenas tardes. It is great to be here tonight, and I want to start by thanking the Clean Elections for hosting this debate, and I too want to thank Dan Shearer for moderating tonight. I certainly appreciate everyone who is watching this event tonight. My name is Stephanie Stahl Hamilton, and I am a Democrat running for the House of Representatives in LD21. I have had the privilege of serving in both chambers of the Arizona legislature and appointed to a variety of committees. By way of introduction, I was born in northern Arizona, spent my childhood years on Navajo tribal lands, moved to Delaware for my teen years, and then returned to Arizona in the mid-90s, where I met and married my husband. We moved to Tucson in 2003 and have raised our 3 children here. My husband is a public school educator who teaches middle school. He's a saint. And I am an ordained minister in the Presbyterian Church USA, serving as a youth minister, a director of Christian education, and the executive director of the Presbyterian Summer Camp, which serves children throughout the state of Arizona. I am currently serving in the Arizona State Senate and am the parish associate of St. Mark's Presbyterian Church. My engagement with the community, advocating for better pay for teachers, increased funding for public schools, and making quality, affordable healthcare accessible for children is what caused me to run for the legislature. I am passionate about creating a sustainable future for our state, whether that is economic sustainability, environmental and energy sustainability, and educational sustainability for our preschoolers through college students. Our investments now will pave the way for our future, and there is too much at stake to not cast our focus in making these investments now. I look forward to your questions and participating in this debate.
Good. Thank you, Stephanie Stahl Hamilton. Let's get on with those questions. As I said, we've had several texted to us already. These are questions that are sent in by voters, and the topics vary, so we're going to be jumping around a little bit here, but let's get started on them. Jim Cleveland, one of our Senate candidates, we are going to start with you on this first question and then just go on down the list. The question is, do you support the expansion of the ESA Empowerment Scholarship account that passed so all Arizona families can benefit from being able to choose the best education for their children?
Absolutely, 100%. I feel like the educational freedom for parents to choose the best educational option for their children is essential. The parents are the most important stakeholders in their children's future. So they need to have that ability to go where it best suits them. No longer should a family be stuck with a failing school because they can't go or they can't afford or they can't travel to another school in the district. So this is a game changer. This is a leader for Arizona in this area, and I absolutely support it. Yes.
Very good. Rosanna Gabaldon, do you support the expansion of the ESA Empowerment Scholarship account?
Dan, thank you. I appreciate the person who answered this question or asked this question is public education, it includes early childhood development, K through 12, community colleges, public universities, JTED, CTE, adult learning. So when we talk about using taxpayer dollars for students to go to school, no, that should be more invested in public education, in public schools, because public schools cannot deny any child an education. Public schools, private schools can't. And so that's unfortunate that is occurring in the state of Arizona, and that parents are having to choose, they want to have good public education, and that's not occurring if we have this universal ESA programs. This is something that the state of Arizona should not be doing. The investment is in public education, because if you really think about it, when ESAs, when these vouchers actually started, this was for disadvantaged children that needed that extra care. And now it's a free for all, and it's being paid by the taxpayers. And the thing is the state of Arizona should be obligated to invest in public education and not pay for students to go to private schools because what's come is the haves are getting much more, and the children that need the most assistance is being left behind.
Okay, very good. We're going to move on to our House candidates. Damian Kennedy, same question, the ESA Empowerment Scholarship accounts.
Being in one of the most impoverished districts in Arizona, the ESA doesn't work real well down here. We don't have a lot of private schools and charter schools that a lot of these parents could take that ESA and go to and do. They're kind of stuck with the public option that they have. That doesn't mean I'm not for it. I just think the application of it needs to be applied in an appropriate way to what is available.
Okay, very good. Deborah McEwen, same question.
Yes, thank you for the question. ESAs are a good resource for parents who have special needs children. There are a lot of different ways that children learn. And in a classroom, it's often overcrowded classrooms in the first place, with some of them top out at over 30 students at a time. And often the children's learning method, their ability to learn, is limited with the interactions with the teachers and the methods that are being taught to all of these children. So oftentimes in a smaller situation or a different classroom setting and structure, and even different curriculum, the students can flourish in a private school of their choice that their parents are picking out for them with the ESA monies. We often don't have control of where our tax dollars are spent. This is one way to assure that our students are getting good quality education and that the parents are satisfied with the way that the money is being spent to help promote and make that child successful. It was mentioned that sometimes these ESAs are being abused by people, but when you have a special needs child or a student that learns in a different way, it's very important to have options to send them to. I have heard of autistic children being shuttled into a corner of a public classroom without any specialty teachers to help and assist them. They sit on iPads and do their classroom work and actually just kind of stagnate there. But when they're given an opportunity with the needs addressed in the appropriate ways, they often flourish. And that's what I'm hoping for the families of Arizona. Thank you.
Okay, very good. And finally, Stephanie Stahl Hamilton on the ESA question.
So a couple of things here. First and foremost, I think it's important to talk about accountability. When we are talking about taxpayer dollars, what is happening with that money and where it's going, accountability is key, and everybody can agree that we want to know what is happening with our taxpayer dollars. The interesting thing about private schools, they're not held to any kind of accountability within, that's not the state's jurisdiction. We don't know where those dollars are going. The metrics that we use in the state to measure stepping stones in education are not the same metrics that are applied in private schools, and they're not mandated to. Private schools are not mandated to teach every learner. Our district public schools teach all learners. That was mentioned before by my colleague. Now, when it comes to looking at public schools and private schools in our more urban areas in the state of Arizona and in our rural areas in the state of Arizona, and this LD21 serves all those areas and in between, we have more resources in the urban areas, but we do not have those same resources in our rural areas. And every tax dollar that gets pulled out of public education and put into private schools disproportionately hurts our public schools in rural Arizona. There are not those same type of resources to make up that difference. And in this last legislative session, within the education budget, the legislature voted to remove the equalization formula. And that was the one piece of funding in our education formula that made sure our rural schools would be okay as the dollars dwindle from the state budget. And we no longer have that equalization formula. And so with this massive voucher expansion, our rural schools are going to be hit the hardest. So, I think for me, the important thing is knowing that in my district, if I want my constituents and the families and children to receive an excellent quality education, I have to know that moving forward, if this voucher expansion stays, those children and those families are at risk. Secondly, this goes back to metrics and how we measure levels of engagement and learning. They're not the same standards. There isn't the same type of accountability. And the third thing here is that our state constitution mandates that public dollars remain in the public schools, that they are not to be used for private school education or private religious education. That goes against our Constitution. And so for me, the matter is simply, we need to keep our public tax dollars in our public schools. All parents are welcome to choose the learning service and an institution that they want. It all does come down to who's going to pay for the education. And for me, the bottom line is our public tax dollars remain in the public schools.
Dan, if I may.
Yes, go ahead.
There's a lot of talk about accountability, and the ultimate stakeholder in this is the parents. And so if a school isn't delivering, like our public schools are 49th, then the parents, if they're not delivering, then the parents will pull it out of that school and that school will fail. they have that option. And so this issue of accountability, there is accountability. And all the metrics and everything that they're talking about have got us all the way up to 49th place in education. There's anywhere from $12,000 to $14,000 per year per student that goes into education, $16 billion. And 7,000 of that goes with the parent, 5,000 stays in the system. So there's accountability, and there's also potential to lower class sizes and increase funding in the public schools as well. Thank you.
I would argue that when I'm talking about metrics,
Let her respond.
we are talking about the testing that happens as a metric of levels of engagement. Now, levels of engagement speaks to education and a child being engaged and there being some sort of growth. Now, the state legislature has determined that testing is the metric to use for growth and potential. For me, I think that's the wrong metric, number one. Number two, when I'm speaking about accountability, I'm talking about how private schools do not have to report any test results. We demand this of our public schools, and yet we don't expect it of our private schools. Our public school employees, from the bus drivers to the kitchen workers, to the health assistants, to the teachers and the assistants and the counselors, all have to have background checks. They all have to have fingerprint clearance cards. Those are not mandates for anybody in the private school system. When I'm talking about accountability, I'm talking about from the top to the bottom of who touches the lives of our children. And you don't get to work in a school if you cannot pass that background check or have your fingerprint clearance card or receive state mandated training. The state cannot mandate those things for private schools.
Okay, Rosanna,
Thank you. Thanks, Dan. I appreciate that. One of the things also to mention is that public schools, accept all children, and I know that comment was made. Private schools can say no. So when I hear comments regarding, the disabled children can go to these schools, I've heard from parents that have had disabled children that were denied going to private schools because of the added cost of that. Public education, public schools cannot deny any child. The comment of accountability, yes, we don't know those numbers. We don't know what those dollars are being spent on because we don't.
Dan, can I jump in here for a second?
Sure, go right ahead.
We're talking about accountability in terms of dollars for these ESAs and where they go. All I really hear is more dollars for administration in schools. A lot of the money that we have tagged to go to schools that has always been billed as going into the classrooms always ends up as an administration bonus or something like that. For example, during COVID, there was actually money that went to families from the food programs at the schools. Everybody got a card, and that card was loaded with money that they would normally go to the schools to be used for groceries when people were actually suffering. There's actually a school down here in Santa Cruz that actually, instead of letting that money go, they created a food program, a afternoon lunch program, so they could continue recouping that money that nobody used. So when you're talking about accountability, are you going to go after schools that do things like that during a pandemic? I mean, where does it begin and where does it end?
Okay, let's move on to our next question, and we'll have Rosanna catch up to us. So Damien, you're going to get this one first. The question is, are you for or against allowing biological males who identify as transgender to play on female sports teams? And I'm assuming that means in the schools.
That's a hard no. I think that's an unfair advantage. Biologically, males are built differently than females. That's just biology. That can't change unless you get into all kinds of drugs that I wouldn't want kids at those ages taking anyway. I think if they're going to do something like that, that should be a different series of class of activities. You know, that way you have transgenders challenging against transgenders and not males, biological males, playing against females. I think it's just unfair. It's an unfair advantage.
Very good. Deborah McEwen, same question.
Yes, thank you. My answer would be no also. The Title IX in our federal education programs was created women's sports in the first place because there were unfair aspects going on with allowing women to participate in sports. So a settlement was made to create a whole women's division of sports where they can compete against other equally biologically similar athletes to promote their sports abilities and to be able to go out and apply for scholarships and get college education based on that. When you have cheaters, as I'll call them, jumping in and participating in women's sports with a very obvious, unfair, natural advantage, these people are doing nothing more than stealing away the ability for those young women and girls to be able to obtain scholarships and excel in their sports. And it's just a ridiculous thing that is happening, and we need to do away with that particular ruling.
Okay, thank you. Stephanie Stahl Hamilton, same question. Are you for or against allowing biological males who identify as transgender to play on female sports teams in our schools?
I would, first of all, like to start out by saying, and anytime we start name calling, when we are dealing with difficult issues and hot topics, I think it's a very sad day. It throws an emotional piece into a conversation that should be handled with care, compassion, intelligence, and carefully. Now, by saying that, let me tell you, our families with trans children have extra burdens placed on them. Identity is a process that we all have to go through. And for our children who are trans, they have extra hills to climb in understanding their identity, feeling comfortable in their own skin, and being who they were meant to be. So when we talk about sports and we talk about physical activity, let me tell you, the school that my children went to in Tucson Unified School District was a public school. The middle school did not have enough to field both a boys and a girls soccer team. And so they combined and made a co-ed team that played against many other middle schools in the district that fielded a fully boys team, full boys team, all boys players. So when we're wanting to talk about the differences of sexes and playing on a sports field, let me tell you, some of those young women were able to best a lot of the young men out on that field. So I think when we set up this argument and we want to start arguing about biology, we need to remember that this is happening all over. And had my children's school not had the opportunity to field a co-ed team, my daughter would not have been able to play soccer. And exercise at the end of a very long day is one of the best things we can do for our children. Now, it truly, in the state of Arizona, is not the legislature's responsibility to legislate gender identity. We have the Arizona Interscholastics Association that deals with this issue and has dealt with it for the better part of 12 years. And in those 12 years, 10 cases were brought to the AIA. And out of those 10 cases, 7 students were approved, the others were not. We had a system in place to take care of this. Arizona was taking care of business until this last legislative session. Now, as to what I can control and I can't control, that is up to the people in office who vote. And if it's up to me, I would say we need to start with a place of compassion. We need to start with a place of curiosity, intelligence, and not in a place of emotional reaction, and certainly not in a place by name calling.
Okay, you didn't answer the question. Are you for or against it, though?
I don't think being for or against, I don't have an issue with it. I don't think it is an issue. And I don't think it's something that really should be legislated. We have a process in place through a legitimate agency that is tasked with deciding this issue.
Okay, very good. And
If I may, if I may
sure, go right ahead.
respond.
Sure.
Sure.
Go ahead.
When you are talking about younger children and the ability for these kids to play on co-ed teams in grade schools, you are talking about not fully developed bodies and not going through puberty and physical development as you would a older high school student or young college student, of which the Title IX does apply to. And when you get into these higher age brackets, you do have different developmental things going on physically with people's bodies that put them in an advantage or disadvantage place in competing with transgender people. So what you need to do is make this an equitable solution where you do not, where you have a separation. If you're going to want to allow transgender children to be playing on a field, you should do so before those children reach a puberty age where those physical developments really have an effect. And as I said, I would vote no on this particular issue because now you're talking about young adults and their ability to compete statewide, nationwide, and even worldwide, and get scholarships and offers to enter into professional sports based on their natural skills and abilities.
Okay, and I want to let our viewers know that the power has gone out at Rosanna Gabaldon's home, which is why she's not with us. If she can rejoin us, we'll catch up with her on some of these questions. So finally, Jim Cleveland, you get the question about allowing biological males who identify as transgender to compete on school sports teams.
Well, I'm absolutely opposed to that. That is a recipe for destroying women's sports. I have a niece who plays basketball for Florida A&M, and she worked hard to get there. She gave up a lot of summers and time with family to work to get to the level to play in Division I basketball. That would have been all for naught if the trajectory continues like it is. It's a different day and age now, where we got more and more transgender males that want to, or biological males identifying as females that want to play in women's sports. So yeah, it would destroy women's sports, and I am absolutely against it. And I guess I just got to bring out that this was legislated in the legislature, and every single Democrat voted against preserving women's sports. So yeah, so I'm against it.
Okay, very good. Let's move on to the next question, and we're going to start with Damian Kennedy on this one, again from our voters who have texted in some questions. It says, do you agree with providing state funding to clinics that perform or refer abortions? Do you agree with providing state funding to clinics that perform or refer abortions? Damian Kennedy, we'll start with you. He's a Republican running for the State House.
Wow. Okay. Am I for or against? So I understand the question. For or against state funding to facilities that provide abortions, correct?
Perform, or yes.
Wow. I have always known those facilities to be privately ran facilities. And as a business, I do not think we should be, subsidizing something like that. There is a good majority of people that do not agree with abortions and do not think that their tax dollars should be used in that way. As legislation, we need to accommodate every aspect. And I don't think subsidizing something like that would be something that I could support.
Okay, very good. Deborah McEwen, same question.
Yes. As far as state funding goes, no, I do not think that any facility should be receiving state funding for referral or performing of abortions. We have many crisis resource centers out there that are self-funded or church-funded or community-funded, and you have a variety of foundations that are willing to support these agencies. Now, the crisis resource centers do refer people to abortion centers if they cannot help or assist their clients. So that is taken care of there. As far as performing abortions, that is something that should be saved and discussed for the client, the patient, and their doctor. And when you have people going to clinics that are receiving extra funding through the state, it's unfair for the taxpayers of the state who are providing that money. It may go against their conscience about what the money is being used for, and it is a very unfair way to distribute funding. If these facilities would like extra additional money, they need to tap into other fundraising techniques and community donations for these services. Thank you.
Very good. Stephanie Stahl Hamilton, same question.
Yeah, I am truly, I think there are a number of reasons why people need abortion care. Anything can go wrong in a pregnancy. Abortion care is part of reproductive health care. And if a person qualifies for state funding for their health care, then I think they should have access to the full range of health care that is necessary for them. And that it is, let's see, 3 of my pregnancies, one of them I was on access, and it was my last pregnancy when I was in advanced maternal age. And when you reach that threshold, when you're past the age of 35 and you become pregnant, genetic counseling is part of reproductive health care and treatment. And that was something that the state paid for me to ensure a healthy pregnancy. And that was something that my private insurance and my husband's insurance that I was carried on did not provide for the genetic counseling and the genetic testing. And so for me, I was grateful that the state was able to step in and provide the funding so that I could have the full range of services in my final pregnancy. And so I see this issue of abortion care and state funding. I believe we should be doing everything we can for maternal health care so that we have positive pregnancy outcomes. And abortion care is a part of that reproductive health care.
Okay, very good. And finally, Jim Cleveland, same question.
Well, maternal health care is different from abortion. Abortion, it ends the life. I think everyone here would agree that part of, that pregnant women should get health care, should be looked at. If there's issues with the pregnancy, then they're dealt with. But just to have an elective, I don't want to be pregnant, whatever, that is otherwise a healthy baby and a healthy pregnancy, no, I don't think that state funds should be used for that at all. I think that's atrocious, actually. You got to remember that we are talking about a baby.
We don't have legislation. We don't have legislation that says specifically elective. We have legislation that qualifies across the board.
Well, you got to remember, you're
Does
talking
not
maternal
talk
health care.
about. It doesn't
You're
talk about it.
talking
And that's not
maternal
what the
healthcare.
question was. The
So
question
you're-
wasn't, do you approve elective? It was, do you think
You're the
state
one-
dollars should be
You
added?
brought up,
Jim,
you brought up maternal health care, and we all agree that pregnant women should get health care.
But that's
should
what abortion care
No.
is.
If-
It is.
No, well, I disagree.
Jim, let her answer, please.
Well, I wasn't through with mine, so, but
Oh.
go ahead.
We'll give you another shot at it.
All right, go ahead.
Abortion care is a part of maternal health care. I have a grandmother who in 1940 was pregnant, and that pregnancy went sideways. And the doctors told her that she needed to terminate that pregnancy or she would lose her life. And she did that. And guess what? 3 years later, my mom was born. But that was an abortion. Terminating a pregnancy is abortion care, and it is part of maternal health care. That was a decision made by my grandmother's doctors and my grandmother. Did she want to have that baby? You bet she wanted to have that baby. Everybody in the family wanted to have that baby, but not at the expense of my grandmother's life. She had other children she needed to raise. And then she went on to have 3 more children. Abortion care is a part of maternal health care.
Okay, Jim Cleveland, did you have another follow-up?
Okay, I would say that I think everybody here and every candidate running would say that if there is a threat to the mother's life, no one would object to that. But the vast majority of abortions aren't that. So, okay, thank you.
Well, let's continue along this line because we did have a question sent in earlier that it's kind of in 2 parts, one for the Republican candidates and one for the Democrats. So we'll go ahead and just throw this out, and we'll start with you, Stephanie Stahl Hamilton. And it is, what parameters to abortions, if any, do you believe could be justified? For instance, no abortion after the first trimester, after the second trimester. What parameters would you put on it and say, yeah, we shouldn't do that?
That's a hard question for me. In that because I'll go back to my original stance that abortion care is reproductive health care. And I think that there is, people want to know, are we talking term limits? Like, first trimester, second trimester, third trimester, are we talking about limits? And I don't know that there's necessarily a need for limits, because in the case of late trimester, third trimester abortion, that is so rare that it never happens, that's something, or rarely happens, that is something, and it is devastating to every person involved. That is something that I don't think needs to be legislated. I think for me, I want abortion to be legal, I want it to be safe, and I want it to be rare. And so for me, making abortion care legal, making sure our doctors have the best information in order to help guide their patients is where we should be putting our focus. I don't want to be splitting hairs of when it's too late, is too late. Each pregnancy is unique, each circumstance is unique, and I think the way we keep our pregnant people safe is by giving them the best care and treatment possible.
Okay, so then just to go back to the question, it says after the second trimester, you couldn't even come to the point of saying that abortion should not be allowed after the second trimester, and we're putting out off the table things like if it's, you know, to save the life of the woman. I think we all agree that that.
No, see, but that's the save the life of the woman. What if it's a woman who was, oh my gosh, when we start going down the rabbit hole of all of the serious conditions and trauma when related to pregnancy, I think the conditions need to just stop. And I think when a woman makes a decision about her body, I think we need to listen to that woman. And I think we need to trust that. I am not here and don't want to spend my time legislating healthcare. I am not a doctor.
Okay, so after the second trimester, if there are no issues, you think that the woman still should have full control over her body and be able to end the
I do, yes, I believe that. I don't think putting all these qualifications and splitting hairs is helpful. And I don't think it keeps people safe.
Who speaks for the baby?
Well, first of all, any birth is tenuous at best. A healthy, safe delivery. And the thing of it is, we're talking about a fetus if it's able to live outside of the mother's womb. I think that's the piece that needs to be considered, that we're talking about developing cells and a developing life that cannot be sustainable outside of the mother's body. So who speaks for the baby? Well, the mother is speaking for herself and for what needs to happen with her body.
So you're saying that there's just really one person involved, and that's the mom.
I think the mother, the healthcare provider, and whomever the pregnant person chooses to bring into the conversation. That is a very personal decision.
Okay. I said that there were two parts to this, and one part was for the Republicans. So this is for them. And Jim, we'll start with you. In what situations, if any, do you believe abortion should be legal? And they list a few: rape, incest, health of the mother, up until a certain point of time. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, definitely, as kind of in the previous conversation, you know, definitely with the life of the mother, you know, that again, that's a heart-rending thing there. And, you know, if I'm going to be intellectually honest, and I believe that it's a baby, and I do believe it's a baby, then the rape and incest exceptions are difficult, but I would accept those exceptions in legislation because they are really a small part of the overall thing. And if we can save most babies, then that's what I'm going to do. And so, and I'll just say that it is a baby, and it's a separate, complete human person apart from the mother. And yes, this is difficult, but killing a baby isn't the answer. So anyway, thank you.
Okay, Damian Kennedy, same question. In what situations, if any, do you believe abortion should be legal? Rape and incest, health of the mother, up until a certain point of time.
Well, I don't think we're going to solve this issue right here. But I can say, and for the sake of brevity, I don't think we should be legislating morality. Abortion is a moral issue. The time frame for doing it is a moral issue. What is approved and what is not approved, it's all a moral issue. And if you genuinely believe that your politicians have better morals than you do, then please continue voting Democrat in this district, and that's what you'll get. I personally believe that you can't legislate morality. That is, I hesitate to agree with Stall Hamilton, but it's a conversation between the mother, the father, and their doctor. And if they go to church, the church. It's a moral issue, and that's where I'd leave it.
Okay, well, the Dobbs decision has tossed it back on the state. So if you get into the state legislature, you're going to have to deal with this. People want to know what you think.
Absolutely. And I am pro-life, period.
Okay, Deborah McEwen. Let you have this one.
Certainly, Dan, I'm going to ask you to repeat this question one more time for me.
What situations, if any, do you believe abortions should be legal? Rape and incest, health of the mother, up until a certain point in time.
Well, there again, I'm going to agree with Damian Kennedy that our government has no business in our healthcare business, our personal business, our abortion business. The government really has no business in making these determinations except for the mother and her doctor. Having said that, I believe that there are situations where there is a need for a medical abortion in the case of mothers who are in danger of their life. Their health is in danger. My mother herself had to abort a child because there were so many difficulties. And at that time, we weren't calling them abortions. They were D&C procedures conducted by a doctor in a hospital. And that was a private decision made by the mother and the father and the doctor. Now we've turned abortions practically into a cosmetic surgery. And that is totally inappropriate in our society, very unacceptable. Having been a scientist most of my adult life, I know that conception is when life begins. And when you have a heartbeat, that is also an indication that a life is developing within a woman. So if I am pushed in legislature to comply with my constituents' wishes, I would be for something that would be along the lines of a medically reasonable and sound term determination on when an abortion could take place. But there again, I am pro-life. I think that every child should have an opportunity to live. In cases of rape or incest, that would be another decision that should be decided by a girl, a woman, and her doctor and her family. If the child is too young to make that decision, it would be her parents. These are things that are private and need to stay that way. But once again, if addressed in legislature, I would find something along the moderate lines and go with that. And apparently there is a 15-week bill that our legislature just passed, and come September 24th, that is expected to go into effect. If our constituents and the citizens of Arizona want something else, they will approach the legislature and request that. And my door is always open.
Okay, Rosanna Gabaldon is telling me that she can actually hear us, but we're not sure that we can hear her. Rosanna, can you give it a try? Okay, we cannot hear you, so we're going to move on. If that is fixed, we will go back and let you answer all the questions. So by the luck of the draw, Deborah, you actually get this question first, this next one. Also texted in.
Dan?
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Thank you. Hi.
Very good. So let's
Yes, sir.
take you back to the abortion question. And the first one was whether you would agree with providing state funding to clinics that perform or refer abortions.
Okay. Thank you, Dan. And my apologies. I have no power here. So thank you very much for this opportunity to rejoin. Yes, abortion is healthcare. Abortion is a woman's right to choose. The decision that a woman has is discussed with the doctor. The doctor will tell her regarding her health care. We as legislators, as I heard, we are not physicians. We need to be able to give the opportunity for families to make those decisions. We as legislators, we should not be making those decisions. We as a state, we should not make the decision if families are going to have children, if they're going to have an abortion, if they're going to adopt or not have any children at all.
Okay, very good, and I appreciate that. And for all of you, it's a tough topic, and it's really rough. And I appreciate your very candid answers. So, Rosanna, I want to throw one more at you because you missed the transgender question, and
Yes.
that is, let me repeat it. Are you for or against allowing biological males who identify as transgender to play on female sports teams in our schools?
Thank you for that question, Dan. Yes. The choice of gender is, again, a family choice. These individuals that have chosen to transition, should be able to play in the gender that they recognize themselves, how they identify themselves.
Okay, very good. Okay, so Deborah McEwen, we're going to start with a new question. This is one that was texted in. It seems to me, here's the question. It seems to me that if we don't immediately and significantly address global warming, then all other issues are moot. How specifically will you prioritize our climate emergency among all the issues you will address in your next term if elected or re-elected? Deborah McEwen.
Thank you. As far as climate emergencies go, what we have facing us right here in Arizona right now would be our water issues. A lot of people don't consider those climate issues, but it is in fact affecting our soil surface, temperatures in the cities, and there are lots of ideas that have been floating around, but the most important thing is our water resources, and there are lots of money and new programs that are coming down the line to help us mitigate that process. We've been very lucky, very smart, and very proactive in our 10-year water programs, water mitigation programs. And there will be lots of changes that may be coming to Arizona in the way of agriculture and the way that we monitor and maintain our groundwater levels. There's also going to be some social changes that people can do. And if they're not doing it right now, then shame on them for not trying to help conserve water ahead of time. We at our house do rainwater runoff storage. So we have extra water in the times when there are times of drought in our area here where we have to keep our fruit trees and things alive. And we're very diligent on what we do with that water. People can also institute other types of gray water reuse. The cities are very smart and watching their water resources in the tanks that they collect for their city water sources. And they're also very prudent in when they have manufacturing and businesses come in that are large water users. So we already have in place one of the most important things we can do with regards to what people are calling climate change. So that would be my priority, would be to stick with that and make sure that everybody has a drop of water to drink.
Okay, and our next question is going to deal specifically with water, but I want to get back to answering this question a little bit more pointedly, because the person was talking about global warming and climate emergency. Is that going to be a priority for you? Let's just say aside from water, if you go to the legislature. Deborah McEwen, I want you to answer.
Sure. No, I can't control the sun. I cannot control the ozone layers. The United States has already been very proactive in what we're doing in this country to reduce emissions. And what we need to do, if anything, is crack down on other countries who are not pulling their weight. That's out of my purview as a state legislator. I will not be able to tell China what to do. As far as that goes, it's pretty much out of my hands. We're already being proactive in electric vehicles on the roads. Unfortunately, most people in Arizona cannot afford electric vehicles, and those take energy to operate and restore the batteries also. So as far as the climate, no, that's out of my hands. It's in God's hands.
Very good. Very good. Stephanie Stahl-Hamilton, if you'd like me to reread the question, I can certainly do that, or just take it.
No, I got it. Yeah. So yes, and I appreciate the question. We are in a climate emergency. Our heat is becoming more extreme. And there are definitely steps that we can take to address the climate change, reverse some of the damage that's been done. And then, you know, obviously, as we're doing a lot of this, it does translate into how that affects our environment, our agriculture, our cattle growers, you know, our forest health. These are things that are very important for us as an outfall of, you know, the climate crisis. I think if we're talking about clean energy, there is certainly more that the state of Arizona needs to do in the way of infrastructure to put in place, and looking at our rates as well. You know, we can talk about solar. There are many things that we can do. The interesting thing is we've got the resource of the sun, which generates energy. But what the state needs to do is invest its funding into storage, because once you capture that energy, you've got to put it somewhere. And then when we don't have the sun shining is when we need to draw on the energy that is in storage. And that requires infrastructure development, which would be helpful in creating jobs. You know, there would be a little bit of a boost to the economy. Something else that we can do that would be very important to help address climate change and the effects of climate change would be to capture carbon. So some of the best ways that we know is planting trees. You know, captures carbon. Our old growth trees capture quite a bit of carbon. They reduce heat islands and boost the overall quality of life. That is something that our mayor here in Tucson has chosen to focus on. And it is something that will be a step for a sustainable climate future for us here in Arizona. It'd be nice, you know, if the state could follow along. And then one other thing, you know, we're looking at the use of hydrogen. And there was some legislation we heard last session about hydrogen, but there are different types of hydrogen. And the one that I would like to see Arizona look at, and we've not, and there was not the commitment to do that, is green hydrogen. Being able to produce hydrogen, it can be a clean energy. But if we don't look at the ways in which to create green hydrogen, we're looking at practices such as fracking, which is detrimental to our environment, to get gray hydrogen. So these are just a few things. And, you know, when we're talking about electric vehicles, again, that is an infrastructure piece that needs to be put in place by the state of Arizona. We've got lots of miles and miles between our cities and our towns. We've got an incredible state to travel and to visit, but folks with electric vehicles have to be so very careful in how they plan their trips in order to charge their vehicles as they go along. And certainly on those miles and miles of road, we also could be bringing in fleets for our state offices that put time and energy on those roads. So those for me are just a few steps that we can take in the state of Arizona to be at the forefront of looking at how we mitigate the effects of climate change.
Okay, very good. Jim Cleveland will move over to you with this.
Okay, thank you. It wasn't too long ago that a study came out that said if the United States just went totally emission-free and everything, that the effect on the environment would be way less than 1%. The truth is that climate has been changing since the beginning of time. And we have minimal impact on the climate change. And so I don't believe there's a climate emergency. Now, does that mean I'm against alternate forms of energy? No, I would support looking in that, but you got to remember that if you're going to do solar, then you're going to take up miles and miles and miles of desert, pristine desert, to put those solar panels there. And then the other thing to remember is that alternative energy is expensive. So now you're driving up the cost of energy for your average Arizona citizen. And so the middle class and the people in the lower incomes, now that becomes a burden for something that is, it would be a man-made economic hardship. So now, believe it or not, I agree with something Stephanie said. Hey, bipartisanship. But, the planting of trees, that's a common sense. Hey, let's plant trees and do it naturally to do that. But no, it wouldn't be a priority for me were I to be elected.
Jim, let me just try to drive a little bit more toward your personal beliefs on this. Do you think that we have seen some sort of significant or even minor changes in the climate in recent history, things that maybe cause you just to kind of raise an eyebrow? Or are you saying that there's really not much going on, you're not worried about it?
Well, I think there's climate change, does it get a little warmer? Sure. But the question is, are we causing it? We talk about the drought, and as we sit here, my neighbors over the divide are looking at 13 inches of rain so far this monsoon. It's been a great monsoon. I feel like I'm living back in Panama like I was when I was a kid. But the question is, climate changes, but are we causing it? And I don't think we are the primary cause of that. No.
Okay, very good. Rosanna Gabaldon, how specifically would you, or have you, because you've been in the legislature for 10 years, prioritize climate emergency among the issues that have been facing the legislators?
Thanks, Dan. Can you hear me? I want to make
Yes.
sure.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. What the legislature is looking at is a bigger picture with the tree ring, the science of the tree rings, knowing that we're getting less and less water. Also, forest management. And so what we're doing is we're the change of the environment in the state of Arizona. We are seeing that over the years, and those discussions have been had at the legislature. So we're looking at the greater good. Someone had talked about clean energy. Talking to these utilities, that solar is good, and it's a step in the right direction. But in order for us to do that, we have to do more in regards to clean energy. And so, EVs, right? So why have electric vehicles if we don't have recharge stations? And so when it comes to what the environment we're looking at, and it all comes down to water sustainability. And the legislature, this last legislative session, actually, we voted in the WIFA, the expansion of WIFA, which is the Water Infrastructure Finance Authority. And what this is doing is we're going to look at the broader picture in regards to how we address the environment, not only water sustainability, but the greater good of what the state of Arizona is doing in regards to our environment. And there's a lot of things that are happening that we need to look at in regards to climate. And it comes down to actually how we as a state have the short-term goals as well as the long-term goals. And this includes making sure that we have the next bucket of water in regards to this. But this legislation is only one step in the right direction. There's so much more discussion that the legislature has to address in regards to looking at our environment and looking at how the changes that are coming to Arizona. Look at all the monsoons. And some places are flooded, and other areas of Arizona we're dry. And so those are things that we have to look at the bigger picture when it comes to our environment.
Okay, very good. And Damian Kennedy, will wind it up with you.
I think Arizona has a rare opportunity to lead the nation in this kind of industry with climate change. Gabaldon actually hinted on forest managements. If we cleaned up our forest, then we won't be putting so many carbons into the air during forest fires. Forest fires are naturally occurring things, but if we want to change climate to the better, then we need to be able to get in there and clean those forests up. That's an infrastructure thing, so we need more people to do that. WIFA was actually, like Gabaldon said, she beat me to a lot of this, but it was just passed in July, I believe it was. So I look forward to working with them to give them as much latitude as possible to save our water as much as possible, because it's an administration issue when it comes to water. Tech advances for solar power. I mean, you're looking at perovskites, which is big over in Europe, and they're doing fantastic things with that. And those are going to do away with these huge solar panels that we're all pushing right now. They're a lot more powerful. They give out a lot more energy, and you can put them on anything, glasses, watches, anything. So that technological advancement gives Arizona an opportunity because we have two great colleges that are really great at technology. And we do a lot of, creation of satellites that go into space. So we have that ability here to bring this industry here and help advance that, which again increases our infrastructure and creates jobs and bolsters our economy here in Arizona. And I think that's where we probably need to go in terms of all this clean. Yeah.
And Dan, to several of his points, this is Rosanna, is the fact is that when we talk about forest management, this is something that, and I know that others have talked about the trees, but at the end of the day, we have to look at what is going to be sustainable in the state of Arizona. And so those conversations have to be had. And so with this WIFA, we're going to actually have the experts, okay, not the legislature. We're going to be making those decisions, but we're going to have the experts that are very versed in regards to what we look at as an environment, if it be conservation, which $200 million was put towards that. And that $1 billion that the governor has put into that is really going to, you think, oh, it's just water sustainability, but it does cover every aspect of our environment. I wanted to share that. Thank you.
Okay, very good. And this is that water question that I promised you, and we're going to start with Stephanie Stahl Hamilton on it. And as Rosanna Gabaldon just pointed out, the governor recently is putting $1 billion toward figuring out the water issue. Here's the question. Arizona's water future is actively under threat. What will these candidates do to solve our water crisis? And what work have they already done to understand the many threats facing our water supply?
Dan, can you just read the first part? It got a little garbled for me on my end, please.
Arizona's water future is actively under threat. What will these candidates do to solve the water crisis? And what work have they already done, in essence, to understand it?
Oh, yeah, no, that's a fantastic question. And how much time do we have? When we start talking about, I know. I'll winnow it down. But when we start talking about water in Arizona, temperaments start to rise, right? It is one of the issues that's at the forefront of sustainability for the future of our state. And we have a long history of going back and forth about water in the state of Arizona. And so right now, the Department of Reclamation was just here from Washington, D.C., was just here last Thursday addressing the Tier 2 shortage. So what we know is that there isn't going to be as much water available to the people in Arizona. And yet, layered on this very complex issue of water and the complex systems, multiple systems we have in place, we've got water settlement rights cases that need to be adjudicated. We still don't have all the water rights assigned to everybody who has a claim on water. So first of all, I think all of that needs to be settled, so then we know what we have to work with. That's the first thing is we got to get clear on who has what when it comes to water. The second thing is we know that we manage water well in the 5 active management areas. We've got 5 active management areas in Arizona, and we manage water very well in those areas. And that's only about 20% of the state, but it's a concentrated 20%. The rest of the landmass, 80% of the state, we do not monitor or manage water. There is no plan in place for how we deal with water in our rural parts of the state. And most of that is, a little bit of surface water, but the rest of it is groundwater. So I've spent the last 2 years digging in, learning about water management in our state, looking at water policy, and learning that there's, I don't know everything there is to know. There's so much more to learn. Now, that being said, combining clean energy with water sustainability, there are lots of avenues that we can pursue to create some win-win situations here in Arizona. You know, right now there's a big focus on augmentation, but what we're learning is that augmentation, bringing water in from other sources, is costly. It will take quite a bit of time, and it will not net us all the water that we need. So it can be part of the solution. There are greater efforts that we can do in the way of conservation. And one of those is something that I've been working on for the last couple of years called agrivoltaics. And that is the putting solar panels over farmland to generate energy, but also to decrease the amount of water necessary to grow crops, which has the triple win effect of increasing by double the crop yield. It is a smart way of looking at conserving water, making sure everybody has what they need so that our farmers do not go out of business. It generates electricity, and it's overall good for the environment. And it's one more step and one more tool in getting us to better water management in the rural parts of Arizona.
Very briefly, agrivoltaics, is that being done anywhere right now?
Oh, yes, it is. So we've got a couple of little pilot things at the U. I get so excited about this at the U of A, but our team of scientists at the U of A actually have worked to get legislation signed by the governor in Colorado. Colorado has done a beautiful job of putting this in place on a couple of their big farming operations. And so they're already starting to see the benefits and what's happening in, you know, one of our neighboring states when you marry these fields.
Okay, very good. Jim Cleveland, the water question.
All right, well, thank you. I think we can all agree that water is a very precious resource here in Arizona. And in fact, they asked what have we done recently? Well, just recently I talked to one of the representatives for our local farming community about ways to help them conserve water with technology, as well as looking at mountain front recharge wells and reservoirs where the water like we have right now that would be recharged back into the aquifer to help recharge and do that on a regular and consistent basis. We don't have an above ground reservoir here in Cochise County, and I think we have a lot of potential for that to help augment the water that's used, especially in farming, as a huge percentage, over almost 65% of our GDP in Cochise County alone, and I'm sure it's about the same in Santa Cruz County and maybe not quite as much in Pima, but quite a bit in Pima as far as is agriculture. So we have to protect that. So conservation, I think we can streamline some of the regulatory impediments to this. One of the stories I heard today, a local rancher wanted to create on his property a recharge facility. It took 11 years to get the permits to get that done. And it took 80 days to build the facility. So, I mean, that is ridiculous when it comes to wanting to save water. Also, I know part of that $1 billion was to look at the desalinization plants. Israel has used these very successfully. Israel is one of the leaders in water conservation. I think we can learn a lot from them. So yeah, again, I don't see why it has to be 30 years down the road. You know, we can speed these things up and get the water we need, because we are going to lose a significant share of the Colorado River water because it's so down. So
okay, Rosanna Gabaldon.
Hi, thanks, Dan. You know, water we've been talking about water for a lot of years. And one of the steps in the right direction was the 1980 Groundwater Management Act. But the thing is, that was back in 1980. So when we look at this new legislation, water, it's vital to our deserts, our mountains and our forests and our future. So the need for a sustainable water supply in Arizona, I can't overstate that. It's increasingly, it's more of a challenge to achieve. We see that over the years. And so the last day of the legislature, we actually did pass the WIFA expansion, but it was a bipartisan agreement, which was a good thing. That both caucuses came together, the governor's office came together, and to put the necessary tools to strengthen to make it stronger, our water infrastructure, our conservation efforts, and as someone said, the long-term augmentation. But the WIFA, it's going to be modernized, and it's going to expand to address urgent statewide challenges transparently. So I'm looking forward to that. But to me, that's a long term. So the short term is actually looking at use and reuse every drop of water, and that we have to do when we are looking at the short term is looking at how we can conserve. So as I mentioned, the $200 million for conservation is very key in regards to that. I know that the long term is going to come, and so this WIFA board is going to create a financial structure to assist with the diverse needs of both the urban and rural Arizona. So this funding effort should be our top priority, as I stated, to ensure that we have responsible long-term water usage. So
Okay.
I was proud at the moment that much of this work was still needed. So as I stated on the Senate floor, that no single effort will yield a sustainable water supply. However, I voted for that bill because with the confidence that it's a step in the right direction.
Very good. Damian Kennedy.
Agrivoltaic, I won't say too much about that because I don't know a whole lot about it, just what Stephanie has said, but that would scare the holy bejeebus out of me. I actually work in agriculture, and blocking the sun from the plants seems counterproductive. So I won't get into that too much, but the question was more, what have we learned? Right? That was part of the question, Dan?
Correct. What study basically have you already done? How much do you understand this issue is really the question.
Okay. Well, for statewide, I mean, I know Yuma has a desalination plant that hasn't been really turned on very much, but locally and for LD21, we have Mexico's damming of the Santa Cruz. It actually doesn't run quite as well simply because they dammed that because we aren't giving them enough water from the Colorado River. So there's a bit of talk that needs to happen in there, and I'm hoping that WIFA will have the ability to make those talks. If not, we're down here, and I'm more than happy to discuss that with Mexico. You also have to deal with water contamination through the sewer reclamation that comes from, again, Mexico. They're willing to let that come across and go directly to Rio Rico, which can and does cause contaminations and very high levels of some very bad stuff. In that vein, you also have to get into the water canal management and development in Southern Arizona. You want to talk about water in Southern Arizona, then you have to talk about the water coming from the Santa Cruz and the flooding that constantly goes on in Nogales, Arizona. Just a few years ago, we actually, in Amado, we lost the Cow Palace due to mismanagement of water flow. So, and they came down and immediately cleaned that up, and there's still lawsuits pending for that. So there's a lot of mismanagement of our water that needs to be addressed before we can move forward with a lot of things. And I'm hoping to work with WIFA to give them that broad latitude to make those management decisions and do what's right for Southern Arizona and Nogales and Bisbee and everywhere else through that process.
Okay, and Deborah McEwen will wind up the water question with you.
Thank you. I already did give a lot of my comments about the water earlier, so I'll just touch on a few here. With a lot of the new technologies and ideas that are coming up and the amount of money that we have now available to put towards this effort, one of the biggest things would be concerned about as a legislator would be the distribution of those monies and the accountability of it. There needs to be a lot of oversight that goes on when these projects go up, and to see them through and monitor them appropriately and make adjustments along the way as we need to. But that is one of the biggest things that will need to be done. In Arizona, I understand that the Colorado River Compact has been, it seems to be very unfair to the Arizona water users in the fact that we get very little out of that particular water resource. And I think we need to hold some of the other states and Mexico a little bit more accountable for what they're doing with their water sources also. So with a large hammer and some glasses for oversight, I think we could have a good process going on here with water mitigation.
Dan, I'd like to several of those points. First of all, when we allocated the Colorado River, Arizona was in a junior status. California has top priority in getting every drop of Colorado River water. So that was the part of the agreement when Congress actually made okayed or actually voted on that legislation. And the second of all, when it comes to water sustainability and the water supply, you know, I served as ranking member for 6 years in the state house. And so through that, there was different legislation to actually address not only what's called the active management areas, but it was also the outside of those, the counties that were actually basing their decisions on just groundwater. So again, Arizona is very diverse. And so when we talk about water sustainability, we have to keep in mind about everything that was said today. If it'd be the adjudication, if it be, you know, recycling the water. So it's very, very important to understand that when we get our allocations of Colorado River, that is just the surface water. The conversation I think is more important is talking about our groundwater and if it be contamination, depletion, or subsidence. Thank you.
Okay, very good. We're going to have one more question, and then we're going to go into closing statements. I think we can make this one quick. We're going to start with Jim Cleveland. This also comes, of course, from one of the voters. Do you believe there was fraud in the 2020 election, Jim? You're muted.
I knew I was going to do that once. So, yes, I do. I do believe there was fraud. I believe that there's things that we know happened. We know that people received notice that they voted when they didn't vote. We know that multiple ballots went to households of people that didn't live there, or they got 3 and 4 ballots for 2 people. We know there was issues with the drop boxes. And so that alone would make everybody, I would think, want to adjust the process so that these kinds of issues don't happen again. And I think those are pretty simple fixes, whether watermarks on ballots or making sure the voter rolls are current. And so, yeah, I do think there was. I think there's fixes that can make it better. And I think it should be a bipartisan. Everybody should be interested in free and fair elections. And but unfortunately, there was a divide when these election integrity issues came up, and it was a very partisan issue. And every Democrat voted against any kind of fix for the election. So hopefully we did enough.
Well, the state legislature went through a multi-million-dollar audit that determined there was no widespread fraud. Do you have confidence in that audit?
I don't have a full confidence in that. No, I don't. Because we do know that the things that I outlined, we know those things did occur. And if it can happen once or twice, it can happen 1,000 times. And I'm not sure that the audit was, if you just count the same ballots over and over again, you get the same result. So no, I didn't have a whole lot of confidence in the audit.
Okay, once or twice versus thousands is the difference between a glitch and widespread fraud. Are you saying there was widespread fraud?
I am saying there was a potential for it, yes.
No, that's not the question. The potential for it is very different than the question, which was, do you believe there was fraud in the 2020 election? You said
I
yes.
believe there was fraud, that yes.
Okay, very good. Rosanna Gabaldon, same question.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate the question. No, Arizona has run elections over all these years, and the thing is we elect the voters have elected who they want to serve in office, and what's most important is you, to your point, Dan, is that we spent thousands, maybe $1 million in doing this audit that resulted in there was no fraud. The fact of the matter is that we as a legislature, right? We were kind of like even both sides of the aisle were kind of like thinking, why are we questioning the integrity of our voting system that has been doing a good job all these years? And I agree with you. One or two things, yes, those are glitches, and I agree with that term. So no, I don't believe there was fraud in our election. And there's so much more that we can do as a state, because voting is a right. And if we put more obstacles in how people can vote, then people are gonna disenfranchise, and they're gonna sit there and say, why should I vote? Because they're making it harder and harder for me to vote. And that's what some of these bills that were introduced in this last legislative session is that they're trying to make voting harder for the voters to actually do what is a right of theirs, is to vote for who's going to represent them throughout our state.
Okay. Damian Kennedy, same question. Was there fraud in the 2020 election?
I have a friend of mine in Missouri that we have discussed this at length several times. And what it comes down to is terminology and understanding. Okay. I could talk all day about the possibilities that are available, but what we should do is be making it harder to cheat. Right. So the early ballot, let's take that for example. I don't think that should be widespread. I think that should be a very specific use. I think that is inherently built in to be defrauded. And my dad taught me when I was 18 that it was my civic duty to go down to the ballot box and physically vote. And I do that every single time. I've never voted by mail, mostly because I don't trust a mailman to deliver my ballot. And if you trust your mailman to deliver your ballot, what is his politics? What is his drive? It doesn't have to be a widespread fraud going on if you have the right number of people who feel like it's their duty to do what's right for their state. And unfortunately, mail-in ballots allow for that. Drop boxes are another thing. It is right for people to just walk in and just stuff as many as they want in there. Yeah, sure, we've got a few cameras for some of these places, but it's not widespread. And getting access to the video to watch if people pull ballots out of their backpack and shove it in there is, hard as all get out. So I actually talked to a marshal during the primary or after the primary this year. And he actually had a question for me that if somebody brings in a handful of ballots, he was told to just let them put it in the box. They'll sort it out at the recorder's office. We all know, or we all should agree, that that's illegal. Ballot harvesting is illegal unless he can prove that he is a caregiver or a direct family member of that voter. And he was told to just let it go. So you're telling me that there is no fraud. Well, there's no provable fraud. Sure. So yeah, I would have to agree that there's no fraud that can be proved during the election cycle. I think we have an exquisite election process in Pima County. We've seen it. I've talked to many people that are in it, and they run it like a dream. Santa Cruz, not so much. It's just who's in power and who has the ability to hide it. Okay, and it's not about what can be hidden; it's what can be proven. So
more than 80% of Arizonans trust the mailman. Is that something that you would look to take away if you were in the state legislature voting by mail? Yes or no? So we can move on.
Take it away?
Yeah.
For everybody?
Yep.
Yeah, I don't think we should be voting by mail.
Okay, very good. Deborah McEwen, same question.
Yes, that surprises me that 80% of people trust the mail system, because I have mail missing all the time. However, let's get back to the fraud question. Was there widespread fraud in the election? No, I don't believe there was any widespread organized fraud that went on. Were there a couple malfeasors out in the field somewhere? Yes, there were, because they've been taken to court in Yuma over stuffing drop boxes. And there were a couple of women who voted on their deceased mother's ballots, which is illegal also. So that is the type of fraud that we know exists out there. When you talk about fraud, it is in fact a legal issue. It is not an audit issue. As an auditor, I spent my whole career auditing forensic laboratories, and I know how audits are conducted. And I can tell you that the process of the audit is to expose deficiencies in the system. And boy, did we. There are lots of places for room for improvement. And now that they are out there, we need to address them. If we don't, we are very remiss in our duty as legislators and as the state. The manual that we were using for the election is an out-of-date manual. We know that there were lots of problems with that, and it has processes in that manual that were there to help the election process along. During that pandemic, a lot of processes were put into place that were not even addressed in the manual under the guise of being an emergency situation. And we've held on to a lot of those little policies and procedures from the recorder's office and in the polling places and things. Well, now is the time to go back and redo the elections manual, get it up to date, and make it appropriate for the laws and the rules and the policies that we're supposed to be following. We need to get back on track. So that's where I stand on the issue, and I hope to be working with the legislature in tightening up some of these loopholes and problems that we have seen in the past with our elections.
Very good. And I think it would come as news to a lot of people that we do have a state elections manual. And you can find it online, folks. Okay, Stephanie Stahl-Hamilton, you get the last word on this. Was there fraud in the 2020 election?
I do not believe that our governor and the Secretary of State would have signed off on the election if there was fraud. I think we've got some checks and balances in place, and I do not believe that there was fraud in this last election.
Okay, thank you very much. It's time for our closing statements. Each of the candidates is going to take 1 to 2 minutes. Just tell you why they should get your vote. Candidates, I would encourage you, if you have websites or anything, this is the time to put them out there for people. And we're going to start with Rosanna Gabaldon. She is a Democratic candidate for State Senate. Rosanna?
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate this opportunity. And again, thank you very much for moderating. And also my gratitude to the Arizona Clean Elections Commission for doing this event this evening. I've been serving my constituency since I was elected on the Sahuarita Town Council back in 2009. And then in 2012, I was elected to serve at the legislature. And I have to say that I'm bringing ideas from Southern Arizona because it's very important that I represent my constituency. And what is most important is that I bring integrity and I bring effective leadership. And I'm able to work with my colleagues from across the aisle as well as my own caucus. And that it is a delight and privilege to actually serve my constituency. And I will continue to do so because I have met the true heroes in our community. I'm smarter because I listen to my constituents and I bring those ideas up to the Capitol. But also when I'm here in my legislative district, I'm able to actually talk to my constituents in regards to economic development, for water sustainability, for infrastructure, which is very important. You know, serving on the Transportation and Technology Committee has really opened up my eyes in regards to the infrastructure that is needed, especially in Legislative District 21. And it really began with the flyover on State Route 189 and Mariposa Road. So if you really look at the bigger picture, I have the institutional knowledge to continue serving you, and I serve all. I serve everyone, no matter what your party is. I listen to everyone because if we don't listen to each other, we're not going to get anywhere. Please visit my website. It's votegavaldon.com. So it's vote with my last name.com. And I look forward to continue serving with you. And I humbly ask for your vote.
Thank you, Rosanna Gabaldon. Jim Cleveland, Republican, running for state Senate.
Well, I also want to thank everybody for this opportunity. And Dan, thank you. It was well done. And to the Clean Elections, it exceeded my expectations for first time being here. And I enjoyed the give and take with the opponents. That's how else are we going to learn? How else are the people going to learn where we stand? And I think what has come out is there's a clear choice for the direction of Arizona. Do we want to go left, if you will, and have a California-style government by continuing to elect the Democrats who, and one area we didn't address was the crime and the border, and we didn't get to address that, and there's nothing that they have offered as solutions for that. We've made great strides in educational freedom for the parents, for them to decide what school is best for them, and that would be in jeopardy if the left was elected, and so there's a clear choice. And so I'm standing for family freedom, for educational freedom, for tackling crime and human trafficking, and that's impacting the quality of life for our families. And so there's more of that on my website, www.cleveland4azsenate.com. Cleveland4azsenate.com. And again, I thank everyone. I really enjoyed it.
Okay, Jim Cleveland, Republican candidate for state Senate. We'll move on to our House candidates now. We will start with Democrat Stephanie Stahl Hamilton, closing.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. Thank you for moderating a fun debate, and thank you again to the Clean Elections. My gratitude to everybody who tuned in and spent this last almost 2 hours with us. Should you have any more questions or feel inspired by my platform and want to volunteer or simply learn more about me, please visit my website at stahlhamiltonforaz.com. Again, that's stahlhamiltonforaz.com. I want each and every person watching, I would like for them to know that as your representative, I take the title to heart. It is important that you know how much I care about making sure the people in our LD have the resources we need to experience a high quality of life. We have big issues to solve, from Arizona's water future and economic security to the issues of keeping our communities healthy and safe. And I sure do look forward to fighting for you and our values in the next 2 legislative sessions. Thank you so much.
Okay, Stephanie Stahl-Hamilton, a Democratic candidate for State House. We'll move on to Deborah McEwen. She's a Republican, also State House.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you to Clean Elections once again. As a forensic science supervisor, as a state grassroots coordinator, I find discussions and conversations with people to be very stimulating and exciting. And I am just so pleased that we could be here today and have such open and honest conversations and learn more about each other's sides of and points of view. It doesn't happen often enough in our society today. We're often canceled and shut off and turned off from each other. But I find it very stimulating, and I look forward to having conversations like this again. My platform, some of the things we didn't get to touch on here, but I would encourage you also to go to my website. It's ever-stalwart.com. That's ever-stalwart.com. And you may see those on my signs around town. One thing I would like to leave people with is the message about mental health and the failures of our society today to address mental health issues with our children, with our husbands and wives who have lost their jobs, our children who are shut out of schools. These are things that need to be brought back into our community setting and allow people to start communicating again and talking and opening up that conversation and expressing themselves again. We've been hidden behind masks for the last couple of years, and we can really tell the problems that it is causing. So I hope to be able to work with many, many people in the legislature and out in the community and be able to bring together the conversation again. So please go to my website and check out my other topics and ideas. Thank you.
Very good. Deborah McEwen, Republican candidate for State House, and we'll wind it up with Damian Kennedy, who is a Republican, also for State House.
Well, the risk sounding like an echo. Thank you, Dan and Clean Elections, for hosting this debate. I believe the more voters can see the candidates side by side and be able to ask them where they stand on issues and be more well-informed, gives us an electorate that is well-informed. And I, for one, appreciate this opportunity. It's really been great. I want to also thank you to all the viewers who tuned into this debate tonight. Your participation cannot be measured by any one person or any one thing. I, for one, appreciate the time taken out of your night to learn more about those that want to represent you. And I am very open to communication. I unfortunately don't have a website just yet, but you can contact me at Kennedy for Arizona LD21 at gmail.com. And I encourage everybody to reach out to me that way right now. There is a lot of information given at this debate tonight, and I appreciate everybody's input into it. And I want everybody to remember at least one thing with this debate tonight, that there are 2 people in this House race that have been active in this district before it was made Legislative District 21. There are 2 people that have listened to your issues year after year and understand what LD21 needs for its citizens and are ready to speak your voice in the House of Representatives. I am one of those individuals. I am eager and ready to be a representative, taking your voice to Phoenix, and I am asking for your vote for Legislative Representative District 21 in November. So thank you, and thank you for your time, and good night.
Okay, very good. Thank you. That's Damian Kennedy, a Republican candidate for State House. This is going to conclude our debate. To our candidates, we thank you so much for participating. To the voters of LD21, we thank all of you who took the time to watch the debate and inform yourselves before the November 8th general election. As a reminder, the voter registration deadline is October 11th and early voting begins October 12th. All registered voters can participate in the general election. We encourage you to visit azcleanelections.gov for official, accurate voting information. Thanks for joining us and have a great rest of your evening.